was the first werewolf? We'll find out. This is Rabbi Yossi Madvig, and you're listening to Jews Did It First. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe and leave a review. And also, if you'd like to donate to help contribute to the podcast, go to jewishoswego.org/Jews Did It First. Just click the Make a Donation button on the upper right-hand corner. As I mentioned last time, during October, I'm going to cover some famous monsters that have been scaring everyone for centuries, and you'll find out that they have some surprising origins. This week, we'll be looking at werewolves. I'm sure you all know what werewolves are. You know, a normal person like you and me who has the ability, or the curse maybe, to become a wild, ferocious beast that can tear you limb from limb. The idea of werewolves is pretty old. In modernity, it pops up. There's a peak, a rash, I guess, if you will, of werewolf sightings and accusations in the 16th century and into the 17th century. But about halfway through the 17th century, it kind of goes away a little bit here and there. There were, let's see, you've got mostly with the European witch hunts. That's kind of where there was this crossover of werewolf accusations and sightings. I'm not sure how you cite the where, like they actually see them changing shape. I don't know. I think a lot of them, what would happen is they would accuse them of, you know, if they were, some people were accused of cannibalism. That's how that would go down, or just murder. If people were seen hanging out with some kind of wolf, then that would lead to accusations. Interestingly enough, I guess some people theorize that it's a pretty natural thing to turn the most common predator in your area into some kind of evil beast. You have, apparently other cultures did the same thing with pumas, jaguars, when wolves were not the main predator. And you have this in many different cultures. You have this in some Asian cultures and Turkish cultures. And like I mentioned, it kind of died out in the 17th century. In fact, the only part of Europe that really showed any interest that late was in the Holy Roman Empire. There were, I guess, about 9 works on this printed in Germany in the latter half of the 17th century. And in the Bavarian and Austrian Alps, apparently the belief kind of persisted into the 18th century. So it did hang on for a little bit, but the peak of it, like I said, was really in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. It didn't even crop up in European society until about the 14th century. So it is a pretty old thing, but it actually goes even older than that. There is, in antiquity, you have references to men changing into wolves found in ancient Greek literature and mythology. You have Herodotus in his histories. He writes that Neri, which is a tribe that he puts in northeast of Scythia, they all transformed into wolves once a year for several days, and then they would change back to human shape. You had Ovid and others in Roman history. They mention it. Virgil writes of human beings transforming into wolves. Pliny the Elder tells a couple of stories of this phenomenon. It's called lycanthropy. That's the official term, lycanthropy, of changing into werewolves. And there's actually apparently a clinical lycanthropy where people think they're animals, and this is also documented in history. And you have people, you know, they'll think they're a cow, or they'll think they're a bear, whatever it happens to be. And this is said to be some kind of clinical condition. But that's different. That's not the idea of actually changing physically into an animal. That's just the idea of thinking you're an animal. Now, it's creeped up into our modern culture as well, in lots of various movies and literature, ranging from the super scary. There's tons that are like that. You have movies like, let's see, I'm not so big into the horror movie thing, so I apologize. I'm not like, super knowledgeable about that sort of thing. But, in something like, actually, isn't it in Harry Potter or something like this? You have Harry Potter where there's a guy who changes into a werewolf. You have it in Underworld, which is a fairly recent movie. Guy fighting things, werewolves and vampires. They come along with vampire. I guess, the werewolf vampire thing kind of would stay together, but they are separate issues. And then you have it even in comical ways, like in Teen Wolf, which is a movie with Michael J. Fox. I think they made it into a series also, where basically they were a family of werewolves. They could change at will into this werewolf form, and it was a secret that they kept. So that was sort of a more comical take on the concept of werewolves. So again, you see this in ancient cultures. It breaks into modern culture. Unfortunately, it broke into modern culture in the concept of the witch trials and so on, and it didn't go so well for a lot of people. And something tells me that they probably weren't actually turning into werewolves. So my assumption is a few innocent people had died for such accusations. And, many people believe that it's these ancient tales that influenced modernity and gave the sort of modern conception of the werewolf. But what if I tell you, that's right, Jews did it first. Let's go back about 3,500 years to the time of Jacob and his 12 sons. This story is related in Genesis, and if you know the biblical account, or maybe you've at least seen Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, something, I don't know. But you'll know that the name of Jacob's youngest son was Benjamin. And interesting fact, less known, I guess, is that he actually had a name before Benjamin. His mother, Rachel, when she was giving birth to him, she called him Ben-Oni. And that means the son of my suffering, because, see, she had a very difficult childbirth, and she ended up dying after the childbirth. And in fact, she died. She was giving birth. They were on the road, on their way to Israel, and she passed away in Bethlehem. And that's why she's buried there in Bethlehem. In Beis Lechem, you have what's called Kever Rachel, the grave of Rachel. And it's a very famous site visited by many tourists. And it's a very holy place. And in fact, as Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence would have it, this Shabbat is the anniversary of her passing. So it's sort of the Jewish Mother's Day. Perhaps we could say Jews did it first on Mother's Day. I don't know. But anyway, Jacob changed his name. He called him Benjamin, which means the son of my right hand. So right off the bat, we see there's this dual nature to Benjamin. The Ben-Oni, son of my suffering, and Benjamin, son of my right hand. Well, later on, in Genesis 49:27, I'll quote you the verse, just so you don't think I'm misleading you. Let's see, what did the verse say? It says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours his prey, and in the evening he divides the spoils. Pretty serious stuff there. That's the blessing against. You're a ravenous wolf. And then that's the blessing. That's nothing else. And move on to the next son. The next son gets a blessing. So this is a pretty strange blessing. Judah is compared to a lion. Okay, that makes sense. It's strong, noble, regal. In fact, it's a very kingly animal, often called king of the jungle. And Judah is the ancestor of the Jewish monarchy. So, David and all of his descendants, including Mashiach, the Messiah, comes from that tribe, the tribe of Judah. Naphtali is compared to a deer, swift, graceful animal. It's very nice, beautiful blessing. But a wolf, and not just a wolf, a grabbing wolf, a ravenous wolf, a tearing wolf. The wolves are vicious. right? They hunt in packs and they prey on, usually small defenseless animals. Plus, with the exception of maybe some Native American tribes, when you think noble and graceful, powerful, you don't usually think wolf. So, according to some commentaries, Rashi in particular, Rashi was the foremost biblical commentator in the 11th century. So he says it's because Benjamin is he's a grabber like a wolf. He brings a prophecy about the tribe of Benjamin. They would grab women. And it's a reference to the concubine of Giva, which is another interesting story where there was a concubine and she was accosted, raped and murdered by men from the tribe of Benjamin. I believe they were teenagers, actually. It was a very big scandal, and in fact, the entire tribe of Benjamin was excommunicated, so to speak, by the Jewish people. They were not allowed to marry anyone of the Jewish people. It was a very hard time, and eventually that was rescinded. And I believe I spoke about this actually in the episode for Valentine's Day, so you can check that out. I know it doesn't sound like it fits, but trust me, it works. Go check out the Valentine's Day episode, and I speak a little bit more about that. So now we're really confused because this doesn't really seem like much of a blessing. Thanks, but no thanks. Rashi also tries to put like a more positive spin on it. And he refers to King Saul, who he comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and he conquers his enemies that are surrounding him like a wolf. Or he's like the wolf that conquers his enemies surrounding him. And I'm sure the Moabites, the Edomites, etc. talks about that. But the first explanation, the primary explanation, is the first one, which seems quite negative. So what is really the meaning behind this blessing? So, to get on to our topic of werewolves, this is where we say Jews did it first. There is a commentary known as B'nai Ephraim, and he makes reference to this concept that I mentioned before of skin shifting, and says that Benjamin basically had this issue where his outer exterior body would transition into a wolf-like being. And so, in essence, he was the first werewolf. A man who changes into a wolf. Pretty amazing. All the way back 3,500 years ago. That's pretty old. Now I want to discuss really quickly, this will be the Devar Torah, the inspirational word of the day, of the week, where, again, what does the blessing mean, though, right? I mean, okay, so you have this commentary that says he did this skin shifting thing. He was kind of like this werewolf being, but that doesn't really answer the question. It's like, how is it a blessing to Benjamin to have this, to be called a tearing wolf, a grabbing wolf? Well, the Chabad Rebbe explains that sometimes an unusual moment occurs, and you have to do something out of the ordinary. You have to act. There are certain people where everything needs to be masudar, we say in Hebrew. Everything has to be perfect and in order, and things have to follow a particular pattern. But we know that in life, sometimes there's occasions where you have to seize the day, right? Carpe diem. You have to act. And if you're busy, you have to, we even say in English, right? Because Benjamin's called a grabbing wolf. Zev Teirif. So what do you do? You grab a bite, or you grab that moment in time and do something that's out of the box. You have to use a different approach, and you have to grab things when you can. You can't sit around and wait for it to be perfect and wait for everything to fall into place. Sometimes you have to just seize the moment and do it. And I'm sure anyone with kids knows that sometimes the kids are running crazy and you can't have time to sit down and eat a nice, pleasant meal. You don't have time to learn something for a half an hour. You just kind of have to grab a snippet here and a snippet there. And that's just the way it goes. So that's the way life is sometimes. And Benjamin apparently had this blessing that he was able to chaparein, as we say in Yiddish. He was able to grab the moment, seize the moment, and grab a mitzvah when he needed to, and think outside the box and do things in an exceptional way. So give us all a blessing that we're all able to tap into that a little bit in our lives, where we're able to seize the moment and do what we need to do, even when it's not exactly so convenient for us. Thanks so much for listening. I'd love to keep in touch. Please feel free to continue the conversation with me on the Facebook page, Jews Did It First, or email rabbi@jewishoswego.org. I'm also on Twitter @OswegoRabbi. Please keep in touch. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom.